Thanks, Ruth. I'm joining you from Brisbane. Some people call me Meanjin. It's Yuggera and Durable country, depending on who you talk to. And I'm from Noongar country on the other side of this nation state of Australia. I'm going to share my screen now. Thanks for joining us today. Maybe I think this is something that's happened before, if anyone feels like in the chat typing in what country they're joining us from, that might be a nice thing to do. So in terms of what I'll be talking about, I was told this is set up to discuss an article that's been useful or worthy of discussion. And for me, starting off on the journey that I went on, moving from being a high school teacher to working in universities, I found Michael Walsh's article, which was pretty much a state of the art of what was going on in terms of linguistic research of Aboriginal song language. That was something that really helped me. And I think it serves as a pretty good state of the art for its time. And I think it raises some questions that we're still grappling with today. Because of the nature of this thing and where we're all coming from and where we are, I'll start off by sharing my screen and just sharing a bit about the sort of projects that I've been involved in and where I'm from. And then I'll go through Michael's article, maybe try and suggest updates to certain bits and pieces of it that have occurred with recent studies. And then I'll leave us with some of the provocations that are in that article that I think are still very relevant today, and things that I've been discussing with colleagues and friends, just in the last week. So I'll try and share this screen and share audio too, because if we're talking about songs, it's always good to hear something. Okay. That should work. So we've got a slide here of Noongar country in the southwest of Western Australia. I was born in a place called Albany, down in the most southern part of Western Australia, and I got connection across the coast to Esperance. Spent a lot of time in Perth since leaving Albany when I was about 17 or so. My wife's family is from around Perth and the Wheat Belt. And so everything okay? Yep. So our son sort of has connection to pretty much the whole lot of that Noongar region, which is pretty good for him. The Noongar region is considered one of the largest Aboriginal cultural blocks in Australia, and Nick Teberger did a study for the Noongar native title case back in around, I think it must have been the middle of the 2000s, where he went through and more or less proved that it's home to a mutually intelligible language with regional variations. And, as with any revitalization language, there's lots of discussion about how different dialects are or may have been. And there's still a lot of contestation around the functions and structures of the language. But nonetheless, it's something that's really important to people, and people like to have those discussions. And it's a language that, despite a history of, the place being claimed by the British in 1829. And then people in that region going through a lot of the same sort of issues of segregation and assimilation that have been experienced elsewhere in the country. That language is still, something that really people value dearly. And a lot of people over a lot of different years have put a lot of effort into sustaining in one way or another. Like many places across Australia, the last few years have seen rapidly increasing numbers of people identifying with Noongar language. There's a number of reasons for this, and the census is really a pretty blunt instrument when it comes to telling you much about language. It doesn't measure fluency or frequency of use of a language, but it does represent how many people want to tick a box to say that they identify with the language and they consider themselves someone that uses the language, which is pretty good. So this census data indicates that since 2016, there's been something like a 200% increase in people identifying with Noongar language. And as I say, there's a lot of reasons for this, not least of which I think is the increased energy around Indigenous languages in general, thanks to the UN Year of Indigenous Languages and now Decade of Indigenous Languages. Also, all the energy in the arts sector around doing things with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages. I think that's gaining some of that momentum. In terms of what I've been up to, I was a high school teacher until about 2010, and then started working at the University of Western Australia, teaching education and Aboriginal studies, and working with my old professor, Len Collard, who was one of my inspirations in terms of becoming more familiar with Noongar language. He was a lecturer who he's still around, he's retired, but he'd walk into lectures and just burst out full-on Noongar talk to the students and freak them right out. And I found that completely inspiring. So to start working with him in 2010, one of the first things he told me was, well, if you're working in universities, you need to get a PhD, you need to publish, you need to do all that. So we teamed up on a number of things, and he really got me started thinking about a PhD, which I didn't start for a few years because no one would take me on, because I'm not a trained linguist. I had a degree in radio and media production and an education degree, and I've worked as a music teacher. So I had no real experience with linguistics. So what I wanted to do wasn't considered linguistics at that time. And I think I found it hard to find a place in any sort of discipline until Jonathan McIntosh, who then worked at UWA, said, well, what you're doing seems like ethnomusicology. So that's what this discipline is, and start reading. And I did start reading, and inevitably came across the work of people like Miff Turpin and Linda Barwick, whose work crosses over inevitably with linguistics, seeing that, in terms of Aboriginal song traditions, they're all primarily vocal, and language is of key importance. So the work that was happening in linguistics is obviously highly relevant to studies of song, and song was what I was interested in. So I did a PhD while working full-time teaching, and then got a ARC grant to continue some of that work, not just looking for and analysing Noongar songs, but repatriating and recirculating those songs, especially among the descendants of the people who were recorded singing them. As an example of this kind of work, here's a little video of, I think this is from around 2017, of myself there singing a song with Nana Annie Dab. Whoop, I'll move that back a bit. Nana Annie Dab, who's wearing the glasses there, down in Esperance. Nanroma Winmar, who's the longest tenured Noongar language teacher in the south of WA, and Ani Wanika Close, who's the daughter of Nana Annie. Now, Nana Annie is the niece of the man who's singing this song on an old recording by C.G. von Brandenstein that was recorded in 1970. So we've gone through lots of processes to figure out what's going on with these songs, working with people like Nanroma that know about Noongar language, working with all these archival word lists, and then taking them on country and singing them again. This is sort of like a refresh session for us, where we've brought Nanroma in just to have a look at what's going on and talk about it. So I'll just give you a bit of a glimpse of the sort of work that I've been involved in up to that point.
Wow, yeah.
I think that's the first time I've heard it, like with mainly women's voices.
Yeah.
It sounded beautiful.
Just, wow. Now that goes right through you, he was singing just like I say, this goes right through you.
We actually sang this one out on country. We went to Bandy Creek and sang it.
True.
And sitting in the sand, on the sand.
Yeah.
Singing the rivers just down there and sang it. And you can just feel, someone's here listening to us.
So that's a song about the sea, originally sung on a recording by the singer Charlie Dabb. And I guess you can see from the way everyone's talking about the song that these old songs have deep resonances, especially in areas where there aren't many songs and there's not much language around today. Then moving on from that kind of work, archival, song recirculation and analysis and all that, I was involved in a number of arts projects, particularly geared around building capacity to perform in language. Not least amongst those was our Noongar adaptation of Macbeth that we called Hecate or Hecate. And having songs in that production, I myself was a co-translator for that project and the composer and musical director. Having songs in that project over a long, almost decade-long time frame of getting everyone ready to perform a complete work in Noongar language, the songs really helped facilitate people's language learning, and the new songs that I came up with for the show based on my understandings of old Noongar songs. They're things that stay with people to this day and help reinforce their language journey, I suppose. So that was a big project, first of its kind in many ways. And as I say, song being of key importance as a cornerstone of the language revitalisation work we were taking part in. Not long after that, we did a full dub in Noongar of the old Bruce Lee film Fist of Fury. I'll show you a little bit of that now.
Yuan Kap, Bal Boga, Bakit Berit, Polarang Bal, Wardak Katak, Yay Bal, Durak Board, Boga Berdia.
Cover Mendich Bal Waramang, War Bria Moki, Rada Warinana, Nan Kanan Barangino.
So that work moved on from our Shakespeare adaptation, which involved, in the end, it involved 9 actors on stage performing Shakespeare, and then there were a number of other performers that were involved and senior language speakers involved too. But doing a big feature film enabled us to have, more than 20, I think almost 30 people employed as voice actors in Noongar language. So there's a lot of capacity building there. It also enabled people who weren't trained actors or performers to have a go in small roles. So moving on from that, I worked with master's candidates, Trevor Ryan particularly, and Kyle Morrison, and Bobby Henry, who'd also worked on the other projects with us too. They had a number of different master's projects, and they took place, they're all submitted now, they took place under the umbrella of another ARC project I had, which I still got, called Restoring on Country Performance, which is aimed at combining, I guess, ideas from Noongar performance traditions and ideas from ecology, and trying to get back to a state where, I guess, cultural expression is more closely linked to local ecosystems. So as part of that project.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in because people are saying that they couldn't see the video.
Oh, okay.
I've just put through a link to the YouTube if people want to look at it later. Hey.
Oh, thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, it might just be because you're not in full screen on the PowerPoint.
Oh, is it not in full screen? That's no good.
Maybe not moving the slides on, I think. Just not moving the slides on, that's all.
Let me try ending the show, and I'll
I can
try to
see it
bring
now.
up
It's
again.
just skipped ahead to that slide with the photos. It was stuck on the map before.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, gremlins in the infrastructure. So yeah, anyway, as part of this project that's still ongoing, part of that was getting together newer songs and accompanying dancers. So Trevor Ryan and Kyle Morrison were key in that. We put on a show called Noongar Wonderland as part of a big Noongar team for Perth Festival. And I'll show you a little bit of that. Let me know, just jump in if the video is not working, and I'll try and figure out why it's not working.
Sorry, Clint, it's still not showing the video.
Hey, okay. Let me have a look, see if I can fix this.
Maybe if you do the play slideshow rather than have it in the sort of, yeah, that might be it.
No, still going to that silly thing.
No.
You've got a different picture now.
Do you have 2 screens or something? Because maybe it's to do with the Zoom sharing options.
Yeah, I'll try and just make it okay, how's that?
I think that might work. If you click on that, it might play the sound.
Okay, cool. So we haven't seen any videos?
No.
All right, sweet. Well, forget everything I said. So we didn't hear the nanas and that singing, nothing?
We could hear them, we just couldn't see the videos.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. And you could hear the
In
video of
In fact,
Noongar
it just
Wonderland.
worked. It just worked then. So as you,
Yeah, sweet.
yeah.
There we go. That's working.
Pokyuan kap, balboka, bakit beri. Holarang bal, warda katak. Yay bal, durak board. Buga beri.
Cover mendich bal waramang. War buri moki. Para da wari nana. Ngan kanan barang chino.
Okay, so there's a bit of that, Fist of Fury. And then here's a bit of Noongar Wonderland. Okay, so what happened with that Noongar Wonderland show? You would have heard Uncle Barry Maguire singing at the start in that video, old school style, just with percussion and voice. And then I'd worked with him and then Roma and other people, and they'd all suggested that, you know, it's a good idea to come up with new songs. So he came up with new songs, and being that Nan Roma said that what we want to do is have young people involved, had to put big beats behind those new songs to encourage that involvement. So you would have heard the result. That's all on Spotify and iTunes and all the different streaming services now as an album, and people are using it for a lot of different purposes, which is good. And because they're new songs, there's not as much, I guess there are not as many issues around what to do with those songs. They're made for people to share and listen to and participate in. So they're fit for purpose. Whereas some of the old songs, you know, they've either got uncertain provenance, or people want to restrict them to certain audiences or keep them in the family or other things. So it's good to have new songs too, but having them based on the old style, I think helps sustain something of the old tradition. These are some pictures of new songs and dances that myself and Kyle Morrison and Auntie Wanika Close and Auntie Julie Dabb and then Annie Dabb are putting together down in Esperance. I'll be going there again pretty soon. And that's just real old school style, just percussion and voice. And those young people down there have taken them on as their own songs and dances. And then I've got a whole heap of resources that keep going up on mayakenin.com, which are all designed around this idea of language revitalization, incorporating performance and especially old song style, but definitely including things like Nan Roma Winmar's translated kids songs and all that sort of thing. That's been really effective in schools for a lot of years. So to get to this article that we're talking about today, Michael Walsh brings up a lot of different things. There's this idea around analysis of Aboriginal song texts and this reluctance to overanalyze, lest the specimen, as he puts it, dying on the dissecting table. And then there's also this concern around, you know, how one would ordinarily learn something about a song, and that being grounded in social and cultural structures that are inherently local. So I think those sort of issues are still very present today. In the sort of work I've done, you know, I've gone through old archival manuscripts and put new melodies to old songs and had to do a lot of that sort of, I guess, linguistic analysis of song lyrics, which can be really tricky. And then I think I'll come back to this a bit later. I might talk about Michael's article a bit first. But one of the main things that comes through for me has to do with traveling songs and the idea that language may not be that important in some cases. But first, because time is marching on, I'll just talk a bit about Michael's article from all those years ago. He describes how even brief interpretations of Aboriginal song rely on a rich array of linguistic and ethnographic information, and that multiple explanations of what a song means are really frequent and widespread. He emphasises how it's simply wrong to inquire which explanation is the right one, because depending on who's telling you and where they are, any explanation could be right or multiple explanations could be right. That's the nature of song. He also discusses the inclusion of English terms in Aboriginal song texts, something that's symptomatic of the frequent multilingual mixing present in many long-standing Aboriginal song traditions. There's a number of questions posed throughout the article, including how much of the language in song traditions is specialised. Michael charts this as ranging from spoken language and sung language being much the same, to the existence of things like spirit languages, which are completely different to spoken language. Clearly, some words are rarely used in spoken language, but maybe used more in song. And song can be a vehicle for the development or rediscovery of poetic forms that might then be taken up in spoken language. In the case of the songs I've looked at over a number of years, some terms that are poetic, like bubba in that song about the sea you heard earlier, to describe the movement of water. That's a poetic term that's then become, you know, in us singing it, we've started using it in spoken language. A term like mullup, which is an archaic term, I think, for being alone or by oneself. I remember here Uncle Barry Maguire using that in speech, and then me figuring out that, oh, he's using that old term from that song, and that's meant that more of us use that now in speech as well. Another question is, does the structure of everyday language determine the influence, determine or influence the nature of song language? And again, there's a scale of, well, not much to a fair bit. And Michael comments on the relative difficulty for Palmer-Nyungan languages to pack lots of detail and meaning into very small lyrical terms, whereas polysynthetic languages are better able to pack a whole lot of meaning into very small chunks. So that structural thing does have an impact. Another question, as many languages are losing speakers, what effect does this have on song language? What gets lost as song traditions decline? That reminds me of Linda Barwick's frequent observation that communities ask linguists to record songs when they visit communities with recording devices, and that's been the case for a long time. Michael Walsh notes how archaic or song-specific vocab may be substituted out. And then there's another thing that's also lost that's not really spoken about in the article, which is the ability to compose new songs that maintain something of the old poetic traditions and the ways in which words are set to rhythm and melody. That seems to me to be a key thing that declines as languages are spoken less. It's that knowledge of how to compose songs and poetry. There's a question about phonological differences between song language and everyday language. And again, there's a scale of not much to substantial differences, as noted by Miff Turpin in Central Australia. I'll glide through a few more of these questions and get to, I guess, some of the nub of what we're talking about. There's stuff about classification of song. I think that's highly dependent on who you're talking to and the reasons for classifying. There's a question about the acquisition and transmission of song traditions and how that works. And there's a bit of a discussion of dreamed and spirit communicated songs and inheritance. But what's left out a bit is this idea of a traveling song. And I think the prevalence of those traveling songs, which hasn't been recognised much until recently. There's some stuff about women's songs and children's songs, and I know there's been a bit of work done on lullabies in recent times. And there's questions about, I guess there's things about mixing languages, which, as I've said before, can be pretty prevalent. And Michael talks about songs being translated, which is happening more and more, English songs being translated into Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages. I think in the years since that article, there's been so much more engagement between music and Indigenous languages in this country. And just to point to some of that work, we've got artists releasing popular music in otherwise unrepresented Aboriginal languages, including Delene Briscoe and Troy Brady doing songs in Yalnji, Emma Donovan doing Gumbaynggirr songs, Gina Williams doing Noongar songs, Fiona Counsellor doing songs in Nagulja, Corey Theatre, who I saw at a recent Codal conference, doing Gunditjmara songs, Ripple Effect Band doing songs in 5 or 6 different languages coming out from Maningrida, and even Jessie Lloyd, who has worked on those old mission songs, is working on Kalakaua language songs from the Torres Straits, particularly with Leonora Aditi. Then in a major work by one of Australia's most important cultural ensembles, Black Arm Band Company's 2009 production Dirt Song, led by Lou Bennett and others, was performed in 11 Aboriginal languages, some of which had not been spoken or heard for over 150 years. So the art space is really, really pushing this engagement. There's a question in the article about how song traditions can assist in native title and other such cases. And as we've seen, and as Grace Koch's article that's on this very topic points out, old songs can be prized. And in the case of the Noongar native title case, songs were presented as native title evidence, and they were very, very convincing evidence. I think it'll be interesting to see moving forward how new songs composed in old styles figure into the proving of cultural continuity in this case. And then probably the last question I'll talk briefly about is this, to what extent archival records can be a trigger for the continuation, renewal, revival, and creation of song traditions. There's been so many recent research projects on Aboriginal song involving working with archival audio recordings and the descendants of recorded singers to develop ways to reconnect with songs that may not have been heard in a very long time. Many singers have spent countless hours with archival audio to reclaim and share their regional song traditions, including, there's heaps, but including some of them, Ngarama man Patrick Churnside singing Tabi songs of the Pilbara in Western Australia, Jesse Hodgetts learning to sing old songs in support of Nyampa and Wiradjuri dance in New South Wales, collective including Rona Charles and Johnny Dively and others, supported by Sally Treloyne, reviving Jumba in the Kimberley, Western Australia, and Fred Leone's recent work, which stretches across Queensland and the Northern Territory. I saw Fred perform a few weeks ago and was just really blown away. And a lot of that work is extremely, it's great performance, but it comes from a research base as well. Some of the other things that,
again, just somebody in the audience was wondering if you were moving the slides along.
I'm not.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's
Means
just
working.
it's just static. I'm just banging on.
Lovely. Very interesting. Thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot more I could talk about. This, but I guess one of the things that comes through in Michael's articles that was useful for me was his citing of Miff Turpin's ideas around song being part of a multimedia package, including ownership, being people and country-owned song, people-owned song, melodic contour, visual design, movement, rhythm, song text, expansions on meaning, which I think is, stories part of that, and song words, the actual individual words themselves. That's something that I've definitely learnt a lot from, thinking of song in that more multimodal way. And one of the things that comes through really strongly in Michael's article is the need for candor on the part of linguists, that they may not have the full picture of what a song means or what constitutes a song, and therefore to avoid making possibly reductive assertions which may be clouded by their own interpretations. So that comes through super strong. So the last couple of things I'd like to leave us with, firstly, is this traveling song phenomena, which Miff Turpin, Felicity Meekins, and I have been, I think, very fortunate to happen across, seeing as we're working in different parts of the country, Felicity way up north, Miff in the centre, and me down south in WA. And Miff has written a lot about this Wanji Wanji travelling song, and the title track of it seems to just go across, well, more than half the country at some point or another, with no one really having a good understanding of exactly what the words mean or what the song means. And therefore the meaning, if we think of meaning, the meaning is more functional. It's a song that everyone knows, that everyone can participate in. Men and women sing it. And that sort of becomes the meaning. It has this functional meaning that doesn't override, but is more prevalent than any sort of semantic meaning that we can discern. It's Bill Hardy up north singing it first.
When you sing a song, put all the cow to sleep. Everyone sleep. There's a song. And this is a song.
Broadway song that went across from Norseman right to Eucla. Now here he's singing it.
So the first recording is Bill Harney in 2021 singing this title track of this Wanji Wanji travelling corroboree, and the second singer was Robin Graham singing in 1970, who's a Ngaju man down south in the very south of Western Australia. As you would have heard, the songs are pretty much identical, even performed in the same key, despite the decades of difference, despite neither person having an audio recording of those songs. And that idea of traveling songs, to me, really speaks to the fact that language is just part of the picture of song. It's just a small part, really, an important part nonetheless. The last thing I think to leave us with is this idea of, well, because songs can mean many things, they can have multiple layers of meaning. If we're going to do these song projects and analyze songs and share songs, how does that correlate to sustaining the social and cultural systems that preceded this sort of, I guess, intervention for the sake of, sustainability and vitality and all this? because talking to my friend Cornell Ozies, who's he's from the Kimberley originally, lives in Sydney, works at Sydney University. Cornell's done, some work in this area, of making short films and that of songs and performance. And he's interested in this idea of, how do we digitize culture to preserve it, and then what happens to it. And we were discussing, going on from what Michael discusses in his article, how do we make sure that people still go to senior people in the community and still learn in those ways that support the way our community functions, when songs and performance and knowledge of songs and the knowledge that's encoded in songs, when that is sort of in the digital realm, or when that's spread out elsewhere in books or anywhere. And that's something that I think is going to remain a bit of a thorny issue, especially as, we go forward and maybe we're relying on these technologies more and more, and things are maybe not being, as Michael puts it, drip fed. But, you have all this information that's just available with the click of a button. It's something that my friend and I discussing it, we felt a bit of anxiety over, and we weren't really sure where to next. But inevitably, languages and cultures are constantly changing, and we need to come up with some solutions to these issues. So I think I've banged on for long enough. I might leave it there in terms of any sort of presentation. And now I think Ruth and Leslie, we do like a discussion, Q&A, anything like that. Is that correct?